medicine itself is kind of nebulous.
My brain is just wired differently.
You're feeling symptoms that the tests aren't showing exist.
People need to hear your story.
Welcome to Major Pain. I'm your host, Jesse Mercury, and this week we'll be speaking with my new friend, Joan, aka Joan of Heart from the Pedal Playhouse YouTube channel, about a very unique overlapping of gastrointestinal issues, including GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, esophageal dysphagia with complete absent contractility, and a sliding hiatal hernia. As Joan will tell us, she has her first swallow, so she can swallow food, but then her esophagus is not contracting to bring the food down into her stomach. And that is just one of several problems that are all happening at the same time. Joan is a super awesome person that I'm really excited to have on the show today. She and I met through the guitar pedal world. One of my jobs is that I work as the community manager for Cosmodio Instruments. I am the in-house content creator and social media manager, so I'm making all sorts of content demoing our pedals. And Joan has her own YouTube channel where she shows off guitar pedals and other musical equipment. So we met through that world, and I discovered that she'd been living with these health challenges, invited her on the show, and it was such a great opportunity for she and I to connect over this. And I'm so glad that we were able to record that and share that with you today. We'll get to that conversation in just a few minutes. A couple pieces of news to share. Speaking of guitar pedals, this is very unrelated to this podcast, but I'm excited about it, so I just wanted to share. My company, Cosmodio Instruments, just released a brand new pedal last week. It is called the Glitch Witch. If you're watching the video version, I have it here in my hands. It's an auto-modulated logic fuzz. I won't tell you too much about it since this is a, chronic illness podcast. But if you want to check it out, just search for Cosmodio Instruments. You can head to our website, cosmode.io, to learn more about it. Or if you look us up on social media, you'll see me talking about these pedals. And I was just filming a video about it, so I'm wearing my Cosmodio Instruments t-shirt right now as well. This is one of two jobs that I'm currently working. I still can't believe that I am working this much. And that's actually another piece of news that I wanted to share. So I also work at a movie theater here in Seattle, the Majestic Bay Theaters, and my role at the theater has actually expanded recently. I am now the general manager of the Majestic Bay Theaters, and I'm also doing the social media for the theater as well. This is also a dream job for me. I'm working two dream jobs at the same time. Still hard to believe. And because of that, I am so busy right now. This podcast is a whole week late. I've been trying to get podcasts out every other week. I had to slow down the schedule because of my busy schedule. And then I got even busier with my new role at work. At this point, I am about 3 months behind on bonus episodes for the Patreon. I actually missed a podcast recording this week. I've been a little bit all over the place with my schedule. I'm trying to figure out how to work this much, balance my chronic illness. I did have a flare-up this week, and that's why I missed that podcast recording. Overall, my health has actually been remarkably stable through all of this, but I need to be careful. I need to not push myself too hard. When I started this show and I started the Patreon for it, I always approached it as if it were a job. I felt like delivering episodes was like delivering a piece of work that I had to do for an employer. And no one was asking me to do that. It was a choice that I made because I felt like if I was asking people to support the show financially, then I needed to be responsible to get a show out every week. And I also just found it helpful to set that deadline for myself, to keep me consistent, to help the show grow. And I am so proud of this show. I still feel like this is one of the greatest things I've ever created. I love it so much. I love doing it so much, and I really hope to keep doing it for a very long time. With that being said, I do feel like I am a little bit more inconsistent than I would like these days. And I'm now working full time. So I have made the decision. I actually surprised myself with this decision this week. I've decided to suspend the Patreon campaign for the podcast. That does not mean I'm going to stop making episodes of the podcast. That is actually my priority, is to keep the podcast going. And in order to do so, I really need to free up some of my time to make sure I have enough time to get the show out. I've been working with Trisha and Casey, which has been an absolutely phenomenal change. So helpful to have other people working on the podcast. And when I made that change, my intention was to use the funds from Patreon to help me pay for other people's time. But all of a sudden, I find myself in a completely different financial situation where I don't need to make money from making this podcast. When I started the show, it was critical that I have financial support because I wasn't working, I was applying for disability, and I looked at this podcast as a way to potentially help support me through that difficult time. Well, I got through that difficult time. I'm so grateful to be able to say that. I'm no longer in a position where I need to make money from creating this show in order to keep on creating it. I can now support this show financially without raising any money to do so. So that, combined with the fact that I've been a little bit inconsistent with getting the show out, inconsistent with the bonus episodes on Patreon, I just realized I can suspend the Patreon campaign and just focus the time I have into creating the podcast. This is a fundamentally different approach for me for the show. I have always been sort of looking for ways to monetize this show without having that get in the way of the show. And also, it's just, it's such a personal show. People coming on and sharing their personal health journeys. I've always been very sensitive to that and very sensitive to the way in which I try to monetize the show. So for the time being, at least, who knows, this is a reversible decision, but for the time being, I'm going to pause the Patreon. I'm going to stop focusing on trying to monetize the show and just focus on getting the show out. And the core of this show, the thing about it that I think still really matters is the conversations that we have with our guests, hearing the stories of our guests. As the content creator behind this show, I really like having an intro. I really like having a really high production value. I really like structuring it in a certain way, but getting the show out is more important than all of that. Having the conversations make their way out into the public is more important than all of that. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the time being. Andy and I will record one more bonus episode sharing this news on the Patreon, talking about it in a little more detail. I want to make sure that everyone who is a current Patreon member has time and access to listen to all the bonus episodes that they want or download them before the page is unpublished. I'm just going to pause billing for the time being, put out a full final bonus episode announcing this change, discussing all these details. And then when the time is right, I will unpublish the page so it is not currently publicly visible. Current patrons do not need to do anything to no longer be charged. If you'd like to cancel your membership now, I totally understand. What's not happening is the show is not ending. I'm not halting production of Major Pain by any means. I have a bunch of episodes recorded. I just need to figure out a way with my new busy schedule to work it into my life to continue to release episodes as consistently as possible. Trisha and Casey are a big piece of that puzzle. Thank you so much to both of them. Their work editing the podcast this week and putting together the podcast write-up was exceptional, which was so helpful. Over time, I hope to hand off more and more of the production, and hopefully that will allow us to have a more and more consistent schedule. So I really hope to get back to that consistent schedule someday. But right now, that's not where my focus is. My focus right now is just getting the show out, keeping the show going. So while I'm making this change, I'm not going to focus moving forward, at least for the time being, on our affiliate partnerships, except for one, which is Rare Patient Voice. That's just such a fantastic organization that I just really want to continue to support. If you're unfamiliar, Rare Patient Voice connects patients and caregivers with research studies and surveys where you can actually be paid for your time to participate, to share your experience with your own diagnosis. You can use our affiliate link, rarepatientvoice.com/majorpainpodcast to sign up. I've also talked a lot about our partnership with NeuroHealth and our Amazon shop. And since I'm changing my focus of the show, I'm no longer focused on making money with the show. I'm just focusing on creating the show. I probably won't be talking about those too much. Those links still do exist. You can click on them if you'd like. NeuroHealth is a great resource. But since my time is limited, at least for the time being, I just want to focus on the person's story or any announcements, community announcements that we have to share. So let me just say, this show would not exist today if it weren't for our Patreon support. I'm 100% sure that I would not have been able to get through those years where I was not working, creating this show, without the support of our community on Patreon. I value it so, so much. I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has ever supported this show on Patreon. We even had a new person sign up this week. Lisa Hale, thank you so much for the incredible Patreon support. It will be short through no fault of your own. That's obviously my choice. But I just want to say thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the support. We have a total of 47 people in our Patreon, 23 of which are paid members. The rest are free members. I do not take a single one of you for granted. I appreciate you all so much. I don't want anyone to think that by me suspending this program that I don't value it, that I don't think it has been worthwhile. The absolute opposite is true. Like I said, this show would not exist today if it weren't for this program. You know, our Patreon producers supporting the show at $25 per month. Unbelievable support. Steve Kavanaugh, Chris Fowler, Trish O'Brien, and Hipster Leia. I've been reading those names for years. Years. These people have been supporting the show at $25 per month for years. That is unbelievable. Every penny of that either went to support me through the hardest period of my life, or has gone to support other people working on this show as I've started to dabble in that in the last year. Every penny of that support has been so appreciated over the years. I just realized this week that this was a decision that I needed to make, and I'm jumping on the choice just so that I can try to make my life a little bit less chaotic, less hectic. If this decision upsets anybody, I apologize. I hope that you will all understand the reasons for this choice. You can always reach me, majorpainpodcast@gmail.com, if there's anything you'd like to share with me. And I will say again, this does not mean that Major Pain is stopping. This is being done so that Major Pain can continue and that I can put as much time and effort and love into each episode as I have available inside of what has become a remarkably busy schedule. But it's all full of such wonderful things, which is, something I'm just continually amazed by. All right, enough about that. Last thing I will say, before we jump into today's episode with Joan, my guest and I are not medical professionals. Please do not take any medical action based off what you hear on this podcast without first consulting your doctor. Joan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. We met at NAMM last January. We're both in the guitar pedal world, and we got to chatting and discovered that you have a story that would be great for Major Pain, and I'm so excited to hear that and just to get to talk to you again, to get to know you a little bit better. And let's start by giving our audience a chance to get to know you. So, Joan, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. On YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and all the social media apps, I am Joan of Heart. I run Pedal Playhouse, which is the videos in which I create, which explore effects pedals in a way with animation, silly humor, and just kind of lead with curiosity in that with chasing kind of sounds and sonic textures. You kind of find the excitement in creativity.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we both love effects pedals.
Yes,
and
that is the main focus.
Yes, and I work with Cosmodio Instruments demoing our effects pedals. So what is your desert island? I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 3 pedals. Desert Island, 3 effects pedals.
When you say one, it's just like, don't do that to me. All right. So if I had 3 desert pedals, the Old Blood Noise Dark Light is definitely one. The other one is the Delayvered Foster Wallace delay. I love PT 2399 delays. And then I guess the last one would probably be the 1312 Black Mass. Nice.
Wow. You just had it right there. And I know that you're also a nerd and into nerdy stuff. So what are your nerdy passions?
Obviously effects pedals are my nerdy passions. I am also a video editor. I'm a graphics, designer by trade, pretty much kind of like a media consultant. So my other nerd thing is essentially video editing. It is my passion. I love learning constantly about new things I can do. And that's kind of like with Pedal Playhouse. I do things for clients. I've worked with, brands and stuff like that, doing social media editing or commercials and corporate kind of stuff. But that channel kind of allows me to explore more creative what ifs. You know what I mean? If I wanted to transfer myself to some otherworldly place, either with green screen or, like Roger Rabbit, I'm talking to an animated, I am learning more than I ever did working in the corporate world. So it's been really exciting to kind of nerd out about video editing as well and get further in that area of cinematography, how to film things, how to tell stories in ways that are fun and entertaining, which I love telling stories. So that's also when you think of the NAMM videos and things like that, they may take me a little longer, apart from my health stuff, which we'll get into. But for me, it's kind of I like to tell a story in a certain way that's very visual and entertaining. And I find that the audience also enjoys that. So it's kind of like a, give and take kind of let's go there together kind of deal, which is always fun.
Yeah, totally. You're absolutely speaking my language. I make my Star Trek videos where I green screen myself into Star Trek, and a lot of what thank you. A lot of what I do these days is I have 1 minute of time to
Yes.
convey information. And whether it's with Pedals or with Star Trek or with Major Pain or with the movie theater that I work at, trying to convey something in 90 seconds or less generally. And
It's
I
so
find that
hard.
you kind of have to look at it as a little tiny piece of storytelling. If I approach those 90 seconds as if I'm telling a story, I find that I'm able to convey information clearer and cleaner. And it's helped me a lot kind of approaching storytelling on a broader form. It's really interesting. I really love that we're living in this day of short form content. As a content creator, I used to get lost in the weeds all the time. I'm going to spend 5 years crafting the perfect sci-fi synth pop album. And now it's like, if I'm making something that's going to take me more than 2 days to make, I have to really stop and think about whether it's worth it, because I'm just churning out so much and it's got to be so fast. But
No,
it's
I
really
totally
like,
understand that.
yeah, it's like, it's sharpened my techniques. It's honed my ability to think about what I'm doing and convey information and just be a clear communicator. So I really love it. I think it's been really good for me as a person and as an artist.
Yeah, no, I had a friend, what do you call it, as far as thinking about the short form and the ways in which we kind of try to like rework when things don't work. And I have another friend who's a videographer, and we talk at times about obviously that we do this. And he told me recently, he's like, if it takes longer than 15 minutes, abandon it. Like at that point, you have to move on. Like you have to let go. You got to kill your darlings. Like you can't just hold on to it. Sometimes things just don't work, and you have to be okay with that. So for me, I'm a long form kind of person. I love the horizontal. So the biggest problem that I've had is making content for every sizing. So with me trying to like take a video that's like 20, 30 minutes at max, or even like 15, and then pick the point at which we have a beginning, middle, and end, I feel like at times that I can't kind of cut the story in such a way that for short form media, I'm able to give enough context when it's coming from a longer format. So
totally. Yeah.
That's the hardest part for me. And sometimes I just edit things short enough that you kind of get a taste for what it is. And if you want to like check out further, you know where to go. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the short form. That's been the problem for me, like over the past like years of trying to figure that out. But I love the long form horizontal the most.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's actually a topic of conversation at Cosmodio often. If we make long form videos sometimes, but it's rare. And then trying to translate that into short form.
Yes, exactly.
So difficult.
It's so hard.
It's so much easier to just say, okay, I'm making a short form video.
Yep.
And if I'm getting lost in the weeds, and if this is taking me 6 hours, maybe this wasn't the right idea. And the videos that I've had that have done the best are the ones that I can make start to finish in 90 minutes. Record, edit, and be done in 90 minutes. Those tend to resonate.
I wish.
But obviously we're making a podcast. This is a long form project, and I do love long form as well. And I also there is a place in my heart for spending hours and hours and hours and hours crafting something. Like when I make
it's a labor of love. Yeah,
like when I make music, and I've actually been trying to get into science fiction writing as well, because of course I am. And that's that's going to take me years to get a draft, and there is a place for that. But then because I'm also a short form creator, I'm constantly releasing. It's like scratching that itch to create. It is.
It's a
constantly.
balance.
Yeah, which is nice. Anyway, creator talk. Let's get into your story. So, Joan, what is your major pain?
Oh God, it's a list. All right. So as far as what's wrong with me, I have GERD. I have a esophagus that has zero contractibility. So it has absent. So I have the first swallow, but past that, it's just the tube just hanging there. So thank God, as my doctor said, for gravity. At the time, it was kind of like a delivery. This is the day I was told about it. And it actually was in April. So it's kind of like an anniversary, I guess, of sorts. But yeah, she just basically said, she's like, don't be an astronaut. You're lucky there's gravity. That's why you're here. And I'm like, thank you. I don't know. I mean, this is great dark humor. I kind of appreciate it at the same time. Wow, great bedside manner. But yeah, it's basically that. I have a hiatal hernia. So the opening of my stomach doesn't close. So I sleep on a wedge so that the stomach acid stays, obviously in my stomach and doesn't go up into my face at night. So I'll have symptoms if I'm having a bad day with acid. My eyes will water. My throat would get really raspy. Since this had advanced to this point, I really have a great voice for singing, but over the past year or so, and more so since we left NAM because I got COVID, I had some complications when I left NAM with my hernia. So the acid getting up, it got really bad for my singing or my voice. It got really painful. And then I kind of lost, a little bit of my pitch and singing ability, which they gave me a second proton pump inhibitor to kind of manage that now, to bring that down. And I've kind of gotten a little bit of that back, but I'll have good days and bad days where I'll have a little bit more of a raspy voice, like the NAM video that I released. No one will notice it, but of course, I was there, I know. There's a certain points of the video where you can hear that my voice is a little bit more raspier than others, and those are kind of the telltale signs that I'm probably not having my best day, but the show must go on. I have to still film things and do things. I've done music videos and stuff like that in the past, and I felt absolutely horrible, like with chronic nausea. But again, you have deadlines. You still have to do things. Like you're working through feeling chronic fatigue, all the time. And, if I eat something that gets stuck into my throat, doesn't go down all the way, either it's dense or something, the instant effect is that you'll see it in my face. I'll look really tired, and then I'll start to feel tired. So I'll have to compensate with, maybe drinking something like Coke to break it down, which normally they say don't drink Coke. But for people like me, that is the best way to break down foods to then have it pass. So that's kind of some of the things. Over the years, I've had IBS, a whole bunch. Everything has kind of gotten to this point of needing basically a hiatal hernia repair, which is the beginning of June, which I'm looking at. I have had several, surgeries in regards to other things, certain gallbladder being removed, things like that. That was the chronic nausea for a year. That was early 30s. But yeah, a lot of kind of domino effects things. We'd solve one thing and then it would just lead to the other. But a lot of miscommunication with doctors sometimes would, I would say, sometimes increase my anxiety about my condition and make me, I guess, oversensitive to my body movement. So I would feel more than most people because the doctors would say one thing and then obviously not fully explain the context of those, or tell me something inaccurate and then 4 days later whiplash me with, oh, no, you do have it. I'm like, 4 days, I think I don't have something, and then you tell me I have. It's just, yeah, I just feel like that they're not paying attention as much. Yeah, because the last endoscopy that I had, which was, in end of February, because of the complications with COVID and coughing, sending my stomach upwards, and that's part of what a hiatal hernia is. Yeah, they basically went inside and looked with an endoscopy, and the doctor was like, oh, I don't see, Barrett's at all. Whereas previous ones, they did say they did see some, Barrett's. And then 4 days later, yeah, Barrett's esophagus. It's basically something that if it progresses can a percentage, possibly turn into cancer. So that's the other thing that they really want to monitor, because the acid getting up is, of course, eroding that part of my esophagus. So they want to monitor that. But that was the whole thing with the doctor telling me, oh, I don't see it. And then 4 days later, you know what? I'm like, yeah, no, you do. And I'm just like, oh, it can be 4 days of thinking I was free, at least on that end, So,
and that's just not paying close enough attention.
Yeah, not paying attention. Yeah, that's why I said, I think I've gotten to this point. Some of the stuff I feel like might have been preventable if people were paying attention. And we get back to the whole, it's in your head sort of thing. Here, you're stressed. Here, take this. But it's all part of symptomology. I don't think we should Band-Aid things. You know what I mean? That's the big issue.
I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm realizing that we should tell people, if anyone's confused, we keep talking about NAM. This is the National Association of Music Merchants. And Joan's wearing the shirt. And the NAM show in January is the biggest music expo in the world, which is where we met. So I want to go through the definitions of the things that we're talking about here. So GERD, esophageal reflux disease,
Mhm.
gastroesophageal reflux disease, and hiatal hernia. And
Yep.
let's go through these two things and talk about the definitions. So what is GERD?
GERD is basically like there's two forms of it. There's one that basically gives you heartburn with acid production that goes up into obviously your esophagus and your upper chest area. And then there's a silent form of it, which is silent GERD, which is essentially what I have. I don't have the heartburn, kind of characteristics throughout the years. And these started like, I would say maybe like senior year and then gone into early like 20s is when I started to basically notice that I started to have like kind of acid symptoms or burping a lot. That's one of the things that, if you're around me enough, I burp a lot just because, that's pressure or bloating. Like that's basically what happens as a part of a symptom as well. But yeah, like, then I have to pretty much take like Tums or things sometimes to manage it or proton pump inhibitors. But it is a progressive disease, which can cause a myriad of other problems, depending on how high, acid can get up. It does start to affect other, things like an esophagus or your voice or things like that.
Yeah. And you were saying that you have your first swallow, but then as food is going down, it sounds like your body is not pushing food down. And without gravity, it's just not going to go down at all. And is that a part of this silent GERD?
That is actually separate, but it can be caused by that. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
It can.
Okay.
That's what I said. And also, when it comes to GERDs, obviously, if you're in very stressful environments or any toxic environments or things like that, GERD can be exacerbated. You know what I mean? If you have a toxic workplace or things like that, or just predisposed hereditary, depending,
Okay.
it can actually make it overwork and then, of course, affect other areas.
Is there a name for this, for your esophagus not pumping? Is there a name for that?
Normally, at least from what I've noticed, dysphagia is kind of the blanket, kind of difficulty swallowing is basically what it is. But for at least what labeled as what's wrong with me is, my esophagus has absent contractility. So it's under the blanket term of dysphagia.
Interesting. Yeah, these are things that I've never heard these terms.
Yeah, I really haven't bumped into, it's not something that I have seen a lot of, but who knows with, the way things are in this day and age, maybe with people doing more tests and scans, maybe they are becoming more aware of it as opposed to before. Maybe it was always there. I'm not sure, but it was the first time I was learning about it, because when it started happening, it was after a really big move that I did in my grandparents' house. This was middle of the pandemic, so no vaccines, no nothing, just me and my significant other moving that house ourselves with like 70 years worth of stuff. Not really eating, not really sleeping much, all within a short span of time. And once we had finished like the move and the sale and everything was closed or whatever, like the following month, I'm guessing as the pressure intensity came down, that's when everything hit.
Wow.
I suddenly couldn't eat, my stomach started to feel really painful. And for about 7 months, they didn't know what was wrong with me. I could only eat maybe 5 or 7 things. Obviously contemplating mortality, and that's how I started the channel, because I figured it was my last hurrah.
Really?
So,
wow.
Yeah. So normally when people are like really happy, they go, "So what made you start the channel?" I'm like, "Oh no, this is going to get too dark. We're going into dark territory fast. I feel bad for this person."
Yeah. I was going to ask the idea of this being progressive sounds dangerous.
Yeah, that's what I said. Over time, it is a machine that over time is going to keep needing either repairs or work. So it's not something that, we fixed this, you're like, all good as new. Or in the process of fixing it, who knows if they cause other things. So as much as the thing in June is a repair, with my esophagus not working, they have to be very careful about not doing things too tight, because then I won't be able to get anything down other than water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little scary for me too. I don't like surgeries. I've had, surgeries where they went to correct, say, something and they ended up having a problem and then causing me pancreatitis, which was frightening. So yeah, I have that little bit of anxiety related to surgery as well. So going in for that hiatal hernia fix is something that is necessary for long-term, repair, obviously trying to get it so that I can lay flat, when sleeping, hopefully, and I could sing, with a little bit more ease and not acid getting up into my throat as much. But again, it's just kind of like when the check light is on and you make a little repair and then somewhere down the line, the check engine light's going to go on again. So like, that's kind of how this condition is. And it's always progressed in some way where like the car is broken down in some way. Like when my gallbladder wasn't working and the doctors weren't paying attention because I don't ever have the general symptoms of things ever. So a lot of guys or whoever the doctor is kind of going through the motions, not to, blame, but it's kind of feels like not paying attention again. And I dealt with chronic nausea for a year, where obviously I had to medicate in several ways to kind of just make me feel normal to like, not only function at work, but, be as a normal person. You know what I mean? But yeah, that was a rough time. And then of course they finally did the test, the HIDA scan, because I pushed for it, saying, hey, I really think maybe we should try this, and would finally listening to me. Oh yeah, it's not really working very well. We should probably take that out. So then of course, once they removed it, yeah, I don't have the nausea anymore. So
this is the gallbladder that
that was the
removed?
gallbladder. That was in my early 30s. And it was just like unnecessary time frame of feeling, feeling nauseous. But again, it's like you have to be your own advocate a lot of times. And it's unfortunate that it's like that.
Yeah, totally. And what is a hiatal hernia? And then what does this upcoming surgery look like to repair that?
Okay, so a hiatal hernia is kind of like where your diaphragm is, the hole of basically that your esophagus goes through. Basically, the upper horn of your stomach gets in there with your esophagus and starts to creep upward. Singers usually kind of get this condition just because diaphragm and pressure and pushing, that's how, or hereditary. There's people in my family that do have hiatal hernia, so I suspect it's more along those lines. But I also am a singer, so maybe it was a 2-for-1 combo.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically, and it can get to the condition where it could be at its worst. Mine is a sliding one. So sometimes it can be small or sometimes it can be larger in my chest cavity. And therefore I'll have dry heaving, acid, no matter, even if I'm laying on a wedge, it'll get up into my throat regardless. And I'll have to literally throw everything at it to keep the acid down. But yeah, with it being a sliding, if you're coughing or you have a cold or whatever, or COVID or anything, that can basically, with those contractions, then just send it, obviously higher up into your chest cavity. So normally when they go about fixing a hiatal hernia, there are a few ways that they do that. I can usually not say this correctly. It's like fundumplication. I always have trouble. But for me to do the repair, because my esophagus doesn't work and it's just open there. There isn't there isn't a door to close or a flap. They have to do a partial, and they have to be careful with doing a partial, just obviously to make sure that I can move food through that with the opening, as they kind of, they used to do it with mesh, but now they say they don't use that anymore. And with my uncle, he was one of the people that they did with mesh, and he had a complication where they had to go back in and it became a real reconstructive situation, which was scary. Luckily, they've moved on from that stuff. But now when they do, I guess, along the lines of mesh, it's more that they use animal, like pig or anything like that, kind of as the structures to tie, kind of like attach the stomach to your abdomen wall. So obviously pull it into a position which kind of anchors it down so that it doesn't drift up. There is the part of it, which is a gastroplexy, that they also attach it to your diaphragm. But that was in conversation. I know I have to talk with the doctor again about it, whether it's just the abdomen wall or we're also going with the gastroplexy. But gastroplexies are usually done in dogs, so they tell me that it's, not to worry. They do it in dogs all the time. So I always find these like ways to comfort you with doctors, like, hey, no problem, we do it all the time. And
yeah, as long as you're not a dog who goes to space, you're going to be fine.
Exactly. Like, as I said, I'm not trying to be an astronaut, though, it would be fun, I guess. But, that ship has flown, so to speak.
Yeah, you're not going to go to space with Katy Perry.
No.
So, okay, all of this stuff is happening and it's sort of like all in the same region, but it seems like multiple different things all happening in one place. And can a hiatal hernia be caused by GERD? Is it sort of like GERD might be the root cause, or are there? Oh, you're shaking your head. No,
okay.
I
don't think so. I don't think that's kind of the root cause. I think that's more of like a structural thing as opposed to
yeah. And is there something connecting all of this, or is this just the bad luck of multiple things all happening in the same place, or do you even know?
I couldn't really give you an answer on that. I mean, that's why I said, like, it can run hereditarily in families as like a structural thing, or it can be caused because you're a singer and with your compression of the diaphragm, that also can send. So it can be common in singers. So those are the two ways that I kind of know about, in which can be when it occurs. But beyond that, I couldn't tell you. I know GERD pretty much in conjunction with a hiatal hernia, like, isn't a favorable thing to, obviously experience. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's got to be sort of unsettling to have this thing happening in your body that...
Oh, it's always unsettling. I think since things have progressed, like over the years, my anxiety... It's like the anxiety and depression kind of gets worse, like over time, because it's the constant state of the unknown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because especially if you have something that really no one knows how to handle, like the 7 months that I had where they didn't know what was wrong with me. I went to a dietitian to talk about, hey, what can I eat? They're like, well, we kind of still don't know what's wrong with you, but so like whatever works. And I'm like, that isn't a plan of approach at all, So yeah, sometimes it felt like I was wasting my time, but they didn't know. So I can't, it's always a juggling of being angry and the ambiguous grief of like, it's hard to talk to people about some things that they'll never experience. And the mortality, obviously, I lost a lot of weight, at certain people would come to me and say, oh, you look great. And I'm like, I wish it was because I worked out, it's not because I can't eat anything,
It's also sort of like this messed up societal standard, that like thinner equals, improvement, which is so harmful, to so many different people. And I also, with my illness, I have such a restricted diet and it's so difficult, I
empathize.
I got invited to get lunch with someone, like a business lunch. And he mentioned this restaurant and I'm just like poring over the menu to be like, do I need to say I can't go here? Like, I often can't eat out places because I have to avoid histamine like the plague. So, so I'm just like, do I need to say something? It's so awkward. Can I find something that I can eat? Can I cheat on the diet this one day so that I can just have a normal lunch with this person who's not going to think I'm weird and I don't have to explain my entire life's history to tell him why I'm not eating at this restaurant? It's like all this spinning out about it. And it's just one lunch on one day. And we eat multiple times a day, every day. And all of this anxiety around food is just constant. So I want to hear about yours.
Yes.
What can you and can't you eat?
All right. So currently where I am, and I'm taking 2 proton pump inhibitors. So my acid is down. Not that I want to be on this long term, but I kind of still have to be on proton pump inhibitors long term. But as far as eating wise, I kind of tend to have to stay away dense foods, hard foods, like you think, cucumbers, like, carrots, things that are very hard to basically chew. I have to either overly chew it or slice it down to like really thin, which, that happened to me recently trying, a slicer for the first time.
Oh, no.
It's probably the last time I'm going to use that. I switched to something else. But it's very important that things are either cut small, like I can't, take big chunks of things. Bread is hard to swallow for me. So like if it's condensed things like cake or like very doughy breads, it's just stuff that's going to get stuck. Throughout the years, I have had situations like with you, when I didn't know what was wrong with me, or my body would react to certain things and we wouldn't know why. I would have times where I also would sit down and I'd be in a social setting and I couldn't eat anything that they had there. I couldn't, anything on the menu. But then you'd have people, obviously they're trying to include you and they're wanting you to partake. And I know it comes from a place of care. It's like, oh, aren't you going to order a thing? Like, oh, don't you want anything? And it's like, I have to it's like you don't want to explain to everyone it gets exhausting. You know what I mean? I know you understand that, to have to explain all the times, just like also the standard norms of people expecting when you don't feel well to say I'm fine. For a time period, I stopped doing that because I just was too exhausted and I didn't want to just say I was okay anymore when I wasn't. But as far as eating, go back. I know I'm just hopping everywhere. Neurodivergent. But as far as when it comes to eating things like anything that's acid, like tomatoes, barbecue sauce, things that are soft are going to be good for me. Like if you think soups, things like that. On my worst days, I would just go to a liquid diet. There are some even protein shakes that just skip the stomach, Absorb Plus. So if you're having difficulty and you just want nutrients to get to your intestines, when I couldn't eat anything, that's actually what helped me get the nutrients I couldn't get. So it's always been kind of a dance of sometimes things work and sometimes I have to not eat foods anymore, we'll buy groceries. And then I'll eat some things, then midweek something will trigger that didn't trigger before. And then it's the frustration of that going bad because it's food that I can eat and my significant other can't eat because he can't eat meat, physically. He's not from birth, funny enough. But that's what I said, we'd buy food and then suddenly things would switch up and I can't do that. So it's always, again, the unknown of what I can, what I can't do. I'll have eggs in the morning. That has been a stable kind of thing. A funny thing from they did the gastric emptying study on me to make sure that I didn't have gastroparesis. And one of the things they have you do is eat a radioactive egg, basically with the strawberry jam or whatever. And funny as it is from that experience, now I actually prefer to eat eggs that way with strawberry jam.
I thought you meant radioactive.
Well, yeah, in order to see it, it's...
Ever since having a radioactive egg, that's how I prefer my eggs.
Exactly. From now on, give me all the gamma rays.
Yeah, it's like,
Bruce Banner, we're going.
Yeah, you go to a restaurant poached, sunny side up. It's no, do you have radioactive? I like a radioactive egg. I
like that. A side of radioactive jam. That would be great.
You're going to Hulk out any second. So I've talked to a few people with connective tissue diseases, with gastroparesis, which is this is so different, but in some ways similar in that there is overlap. That's the thing. Yeah. There's a part of your gastrointestinal tract that is not moving things through. Yep. So it sounds like for you, gravity for now is helping. If this is progressive, is that something you've talked about or thought about or?
More or less, they're looking at it in terms of Barrett's esophagus, which is the cancer of throat and stomach. That's mostly what we've talked about in trying to prevent that. And that's the whole thing for the corrective, hiatal hernia, so that it doesn't keep sliding up and down. It stays down so that we can reduce the damage there of acid hitting that area of my esophagus. With everything that happens, and more so since that whole event happened in the 7 months of not being able to eat and actually contemplating several times my mortality and not having any energy, lying in bed, most times. And I have periods where sometimes I will just out of exhaustion of doing things or overdo it. And I'll have a week or two where I'll make a video and like the work gets so labor intensive upon release. I'll sometimes get so fatigued and exhausted, my body will just like say, no, like you aren't doing anything. Like, we are not well now. I am not feeling good. Bo Burnham kind of like, that's basically what it is. Like, we are not doing anything right now. And then of course the guilt of not doing things and seeing able-bodied people just kind of just keep going. It's like, oh, like I wish this wasn't the thing that I keep having to go up against to be creative and then be sidelined, not of my own choice. And there's a lot of grief attached to it. And also, depression obviously comes in that when you can't do the things that you love doing, you know what I mean? So it's always a balancing act. And with one step up in a quality of life with a procedure or things, or some kind of diagnosis that you have, there's always that part of the grieving process of, the denial, the acceptance, that whole thing that you kind of have to come to terms with when you're told it's permanent. And then of course, who knows what the future is, so that's kind of mostly, I guess, what I've kind of like, juggled with, I think most times.
Yeah, that's really well said. Absolutely. I think we all have gone through our version of that, and it's an important part of the process that is so personal and so individual and so lonely. And
it is.
It's so tough.
Incredibly lonely.
Yeah, and for you, I mean, we're talking about a disease that I've never heard about.
Yeah.
And when you tell me I have GERD, what pops into my mind is not even close to what you've lived through. Like your version of GERD is one that I haven't heard of, and all the specificity of the way that this hiatal hernia and your esophagus not contracting, all of this is combining in a really specific way where finding anyone else in the world who lives through this is, next to impossible. And hopefully you'll find someone to talk to about it. I mean, that's the whole idea of this podcast is like, let's connect people.
That's also what I was thinking again in sharing my story. Maybe somebody may think, oh, well, I have something like that too. And maybe they're a little bit further along, either between their doctors or diagnosis or something, that in sharing that, either comments or something. And I also learned a little bit more than maybe what my doctors haven't figured out, because a lot of this is still new. I keep going to like scientific journals sometimes periodically just to see if there's any kind of like treatment or any kind of research of advancements of whether. And there still isn't. I mean, not that I'm doing the self-diagnosing kind of thing, but I just want to know, like, as far as the studies, like, where are we? You know what I mean? As far as, there's other forms of it when it's partial, but because mine is like completely gone, I am at the point where there is no, treatment for it. But for people who have partial or still have some contractility, they have kind of treatments like Botox or like some electrolysis. Like they have ways of kind of stimulating things to like function a little bit better. But in my case, there's just like nothing.
Yeah. You're on this individual journey. And it's why I really appreciate you coming on the show. And it's what this show is all about. And on top of that, there is this broader common experience of living with chronic illness where so much of what you've talked about, I relate to so much, the way that doctors have treated you, which I want to hear more about, this idea of like having to be so careful about what you eat, this idea of going through something completely alone, not knowing anyone else going through it. And, now that I have a diagnosis, that's really changed for me, but that was my life for, 30 years, for a really long time. And also, you talking about not being able to sing and not being able to pursue your creativity because of what's been happening. I lived through that too. Before getting my diagnosis, mast cell activation comes with a lot of sinus swelling. And I was having issues in my sinuses where I couldn't sing for years. And I was pursuing, like, I was playing in rock bands and I was recording my music, and I had just started a new band before my health crashed. And then I just completely lost the ability to sing. Like I just couldn't hit notes because my sinuses were so swollen shut. And it took years to figure that out. And I completely adjusted my life and changed everything and like gave up on so many things. and then got this diagnosis and medication that has brought so much of it back. And it's not like I'm going back to who I used to be. It's like I am a new person now that is integrating all these experiences. And it's just like these journeys are just not linear, you know, and they go up and down, and you just don't know what the future holds. But I find that, you know, I mean, just for me personally, my journey was all about learning how to live in the present and find as much joy and, you know, and as much fulfillment as I could in the present moment. And I saw when I said that, you emphatically shook your head. Yes. Is that something you've discovered as well?
Yes, I have. And again, touching back on the whole thing that you were talking about and some of, again, how we overlap, when some of these things were starting to occur and like symptoms that I didn't know at the time were those, I would have sinus issues. Of course, acid getting up. It would be eye watering. My nose would get stuffy as if I had like a sinus infection, and I have to use saline spray to like get up there to reduce the inflammation, or my ears would hurt or ring at times when it gets bad. But yeah, I also would have, you know, I couldn't sing, or the pitch would not be there anymore. And I'm a person that can sing with perfect pitch. So
wow.
There is, again, like the grief is always ambiguous and intertwined, and it's very lonely because you can't talk to anyone, and everyone just expects you to do what everyone else does. And like, why are you taking so long? Like, where are you? Why haven't you done this yet? You know, you would be further along, or you would be here if you could just be quick like everyone else, or do less, you know, so that it was not like, let's say, a big production. But honestly, if I am being less of myself, I'm betraying myself. And with the time that I have, and now connecting it to being present and being more myself, rather than, of course, learning boundaries and not people pleasing. It's the whole thing of living for myself, focusing on the things that I want to do, knowing that every day is kind of precious, and I don't know what my future is. I mean, from one day to the next, I don't know what my symptomology is. You know, things could go south any day, and it's kind of a situation of thinking that nothing is trivial. You know, we like to think of life as an inexhaustible well, and that, you know, things in life only happen a certain number of times, really. Like, how many times will you see a sunrise, or a memory of your childhood is so like a part of your being that you couldn't really figure you know, imagine your life without it, maybe 4 or 5 times, really. And yet it all seems limitless. You know, it's kind of, that was a quote from Sheltering Sky that's always, you know, accompanying me through this process, because I like to be present. And when I'm talking with people, I like to be in the moment with people. You know, when I go to events, like my significant other will take photos with me with people, but I'm like, I'm more wanting to talk to the person and be immersed in who they are, not just what they do. You know, obviously we're both in the same community. We both nerd out about effects pedals or gear, stuff like that. But I really want to just know people as people. And in the time that I'm alive, I think connection is so much the important thing when we're on our journeys, how alone we are, to find ways of connecting our common ground between us, to shorten the distance or time of those feelings. In regards to when we think about the feelings in which we have around illness and navigating, you know, existing in a world that is kind of difficult for us and not made for us, it sometimes gets really difficult in social spaces. Like, it's really good to focus on not only just yourself, but also the people that understand that and make space for you, or understand, you know, obviously you have these things, and rather than, you know, make you feel shame or bad for these things that you're feeling, or the things that make it harder for you, they find ways to help, you know, versus hinder. You know, you find people, of course, the more you choose yourself, you find other people as well that kind of in a similar vein. Like when we talked, we found that we had a lot of overlap, and we had a lot of empathy and sympathy because some of the things we share together. And if we never had that conversation in that chance meeting by bumping into each other at NAMM, we wouldn't be here now having these kind of conversations also.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, you talking about being in the moment with people and like really
Yeah, it's
diving
really
into
important to
conversations.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder, without these challenges that you face, if that would have developed into such a important part of you. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a wonderful trait. It's something that I think is so important. And I am hearing a lot of ways in which this has shaped you as a person, and maybe some of these are positive things. Is that something you've thought about?
I guess some things that I've thought about throughout the years in thinking about how it makes me as a person. I know a lot of times, I know there are a lot of good traits about me. I'm not perfect, as much as I guess at the end of each video, I say, be the good you wish to see in the world. And for me, again, people make mistakes. We're flawed. As long as you have the work ethic, or you want to basically grow and try to be the good that's in the world, you make good ripples. And therefore, that's how you can kind of, in other people, encourage the good, and it pays forward somehow. You know what I mean? You're doing some kind of good impact, or at least I hope so. That's always like, as much as on the camera, I know I come off as more charismatic. But, for the most part, I'm very anxious doing these things. It's not like a normal thing. And I do love doing it. But at the same time, it is also very scary doing these things. But yeah, as far as a person myself, I try to be good. I try to be empathetic to other people and listen and see both sides of the street. I try to put myself in other people's shoes as best as I can. Sometimes if I miss details, or, it's always a process of learning and growing. And I think if we give each other more grace while either we're handling our health issues, or, just navigating, let's say if you have a friend that passes away, or, there's people in your life that are no longer there. Like, we have to have more grace for people during those time periods of life, because with chronic illness, it can just appear anytime. And then you basically have an instance where you're alone in that kind of suffering because you don't have a support system. You have people that seem to be your friends when you're entertaining or you're of use. And then suddenly when your health, or you're in a stage of grief, you're no longer of use. And then, those people just disappear while you're just going through so much of your problems and navigating this whole uncharted kind of thing. But I think the thing that we have as artists, and it's something, again, I've thought about, that we go into the darkness to find the light. And when we can't see the light, sometimes you are the light, and you can't see that. Wow. And I've had to navigate again and think about things like this, because there would be times where things would get pretty dark and I wouldn't really know, what to do or where to go. Obviously I never thought about, suicide or whatever, but there would be times where the emotions would just be so strong that, like, you'd have some kind of thought of saying, I don't want to be here. But it's more so the fact of these feelings or emotions are so overwhelming, I don't want to feel them. Not that it's, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it just gets so much of both the overwhelming feelings that you have no one to process with, because no one else is feeling or going through these things. And it's not something you can easily, or even if you would want someone to feel that to understand. I kind of wish that we didn't have to feel things that someone else felt, or go through the same things in order to really get a grasp. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. That's why for me, like, I try to have empathy, obviously while having boundaries, for the people I meet, because I don't know where they're coming from, or what kind of trauma they carry, or whatever is operating that we don't talk about,
Yeah. And that's also a big part of our relationship with doctors, is that, sometimes they just don't get it. And when that's the person you're going to for help, and they're not listening, and they're not understanding. I mean, tell me about that. What's that been like for you?
I've had some doctors that have been my heroes. A lot of my doctors, I tend to find that listen to me were of the female gender as opposed to men that I've had. I've had more troubled history with those doctors because either they don't listen or they tell you half of what you need in order to just do the procedure and then cause more problems. Whereas I've had female doctors, I've had both good and bad. I've had ones that have had egos, and I've had ones that hold my hand and tell me, this isn't your fault. You have done everything possible, and you are at this point or junction in your life, not of your own making. So yeah, I'm trying not to cry because like to have a doctor sit there and empathetically with that kind of bedside manner saying, I see you, you have actually tried to be a good patient and just still things, just the world, like everything is just still fucked and I'm sorry. But yeah, like I have had wonderful doctors, and my motility doctor that I've had recently, I know we're kind of like on dicey territory because that was kind of the does not have worn bedside manner, does not take accountability. And when she says one thing, and then the next time I got there, I was like, but you said this, there's a circumventing or deflection that happens. And it's like, if you get something wrong, try to take accountability. And if you can't, at least give me a little bit more information when you're like circumventing the topic that I can hold on to so I don't walk out of here feeling worse or even more hypervigilant because my doctor just gaslit me. You know what I mean? That my insurance just paid for that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like my doctor just wasted my time gaslighting me. Like I go to a telehealth and she's like, why are we here? Like,
oh
I'm just like, wow. Okay, that's one way to start. Okay, well, I guess it's official. You don't like me, and I don't like you.
Oh man, is there another option for motility?
I know.
Doctor?
I'm already deciding. Like, I'm just gonna get another motility doctor because it's just like telling me that I'm hypersensitive is the reason why I'm feeling all this. It starts to go into the territory if it's in your head. Sort of thing. Not that there isn't somatic. I've started to learn about that. The somatic, obviously, your nervous system and everything. But the more unknown something is to me, of course, my anxiety is probably going to, my brain is very, very vivid. It's almost like a movie, the way like it's both great for creativity, but also not great when your anxiety is in control of it. It can think of all these things that could be going on if a doctor isn't literally telling you directly and plainly, this is what's going on. This is possibly what you may have to navigate. If there was a little bit more direct conversation of what's going on versus all of this gaslighting, I think it would be better patient relations and not this kind of like it's in your head kind of deal. And I always, when someone says something like that, like a doctor, I think it's code for I don't know.
Yes,
like
totally.
I don't want to do the extra work with you. I want you to get frustrated enough to go to somebody else. Like that's what I get from it. So that's even with my mom. My mom has been having vertigo issues, so I've been taking her to PT in the last like week or so. I know we're kind of getting off topic, but in helping her with her things, and I've been going over every day for about an hour to help her with the Epley maneuver. To kind of sort her through that to hopefully, fix that. Yeah. So she's been going through that. And of course, they're going to focus on her eyes as well. But again, the doctor for her, for PT, has got my number, has texted me, very supportive. If you have any questions, you can text me. I'm here for you. Like that kind of support system with your patients. Not that at this point, I feel like I need to do that. But like, I would just look at my phone with a text and I'm just like, thank you. Like my mother has a supportive team, not just me. And she was making sure when I was there at PT, I was learning these things so I could do it with my mom. You know what I mean? Like you have a support system. If we have, medical care providers that are more involved in our care and the success and support of us having a positive result, not that we always will, I think our overall sense of well-being and mental health also, considering our situations, I think also will feel less lonely, less anxiety and depressive, and will feel like at least, regardless of what's going on, we at least have people that are in our corner versus, hey, maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we won't,
Yeah.
It's
wow.
just so complicated.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, I have one more question for you. So it's a little bit of a different last question. I'm just thinking about how isolating this has been for you, and my sincere hope that there's someone else listening who's been through this. And let's talk to that person. If you could give any words of encouragement or companionship to someone else in the world living through this right now, what would you say?
I would say that we should have courage in sharing the things that we go through. And I think it's really helpful. And again, going back to the good ripples, the vulnerability is our strength, not our weakness. Society usually dictates to us. Obviously, again, have boundaries. Don't overextend yourself. You don't have the energy to do it or the frame of mind to do it. Obviously, take time for yourself until you feel obviously ready to share or do those kind of things. But in sharing, you connect with people that you find not only that you can relate to, but also see you. So if this kind of gives you the encouragement to do that, I also like to hear about that as well, because I have not met anybody kind of aside from the one person, which I talk to every so often, with a condition that's like this. But just keep going. And it gets rough sometimes, but sometimes in getting lost in our creativity or getting lost in the people and the things that we love make life manageable, especially when the times that is the darkest and when it feels completely at a loss.
Wow. You've really blown me away today. I mean, thank you so much for your
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate even us connecting further.
Yeah, because I know. And I'm so glad we did. And I really, I feel like because of a lot of our shared chronic illness experience, even if it's not the same disease, I really want to be that person for you. If you need someone to talk to, please reach out, and we've been chatting a little bit on our Instagrams.
Cat videos.
Cat videos. Yeah.
Yeah. But, that's usually my form of pebbling. If we become friends or talking, that's my form of pebbling. You'll get cat videos or your videos. That's going to happen.
Yeah. But then here's this thing of the deepest, hardest things that each of us have been through actually have some similarity. And we haven't even talked about it. Barely. We touched on it a little bit at NAMM, but
we did. This is a little bit more intricate. Yeah.
And I just have this completely different sense now of the depth of intensity of what you've experienced, which is, just by saying I have GERD, it's not going to convey that at all. I mean,
there's even things I didn't touch on and we could probably talk later about. But it's even, there's only so much you can do. Sorry. There's only so much that you can talk about in an hour, you know what I mean? Absolutely. To really only get to the surface in which our life is mostly kind of an onion. There's so many layers to us as people that it's only getting to know people over time that you kind of can unravel the mysteries of who they are and beyond the surface of what we normally don't get to see of people. That I think is the spectrum of color we get when it comes to life, of seeing how people glow in different ways, the more you get to know them and when you get past the layers.
Yeah, totally. And I really feel like you just pulled this whole layer back today. And I just really appreciate it. I mean, it's, I feel so strongly about the importance of being open about our health challenges because we are socialized not to. And then on top of being isolated in the journey, you then feel isolated from being able to even express it to anyone else. Yeah. So it's so important to be open about that. And that's what this whole platform is for. And you just took full advantage of that today in a way that is such a gift to me and to everyone listening. So, wow. Thank you. Thank you. Just thank you. Please tell our listeners where they can go to connect with you online, to check out Pedal Playhouse and all of your amazing work for the pedal community. Where can people go to connect with you?
All right. Well, mainly you can go to YouTube to basically find most of the high production, videos. I'll post on Instagram. It's all under the same name. I'm on Threads as well. TikTok, I sometimes will post things, but mainly I think I'm mostly posting Instagram and YouTube for the most part. I kind of find that it's more creative, in expression, at least for what I do. Those ones are basically the main way that you can connect with me, as long as like you're respectful, and kind, more than welcome to talk or interact and share the things that we love, like effects pedals and gear and stuff like cats, But yeah, I'm relatively approachable, and all the times that basically I'm making videos, I'm learning just as much as everybody else. And I know there's a lot of people in this gear community that have been playing instruments since they were like 8 or 12, but I started later in life. So I know there's other people out there like me that may have started later. So I hope in seeing me do things, it gives you the encouragement or courage to put yourself out there in your creative endeavors and just be seen for the wonderful, creative person that you are and all the things that you do. Basically in people, in people sharing and whatnot, Pedal Playhouse in a sense is basically leading with creativity. So I started later than most people in playing guitar. So you think a lot of people in the gear space have been playing, since they were 8 or 12 or everything. So I'm also learning at the same time. So I'm hoping that as I am being creative, playing guitar, still basically creating despite being further, along in my journey when I started getting into instruments, it also gives someone else representation where they may be just starting later in life, and it encourages them to be creative and to share their music, or maybe put themselves in front of the camera and show them playing with effects pedals. I mean, I'm just hoping that in seeing me do it, it encourages them and giving them the courage as well to do as well. And we learn together. I mean, I think that's most the important part about storytelling and sharing. So Pedal Playhouse is very much an amalgamation of exploring your creativity with curiosity. And let's see what's possible today, So it's
Amazing.
at Pedal Playhouse on TikTok, YouTube, Threads. It's under the same, name. So I go by stage name wise Joan of Heart. But it's mostly linked to Pedal Playhouse.
Perfect. Wow. Well, Joan, thank you again for coming on the show, doing such an incredible job today. It's
No, thank you for having me.
really,
I
really
appreciate it.
impactful. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Major Pain. I'm Jesse Mercury, the creator of this podcast, with support from Trisha Schmidt and Casey McKenzie. Artwork by Egg Salad Salad. Our theme music is the song Time Machine from my synthpop album Sci-Fi, now streaming everywhere. Join our community on social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, all at Major Pain Podcast. If you have questions or comments you'd like to share with myself, our guests, or our listeners, send an email to majorpainpodcast@gmail.com. You can also head to our website to learn more about this show, support its creation, or leave a comment on any episode at majorpainpodcast.com. Major Pain is supported by our listeners on Patreon. Thank you to our $2 per month supporters, our $7 per month patrons Naomi Adele Smith, Sonny Roberts, Kelsey Matson, Alexandria Henderson, Justin Minnick, Heather Muncie, and Robert, and our $25 per month producers Steve Kavanaugh, Chris Fowler, Trish O'Brien, and Hipster Leia. Learn how you can support this podcast while receiving special recognition on the show, gifts, and monthly bonus episodes at patreon.com/majorpainpodcasts.